All right, so now we're going to implement what we just talked about. So again, our light source is back here somewhere. We're going to create a shape like this for just kind of a light to dark area, but again, it's going to have a gradient across this area. Or maybe it starts, I think it'll make sense to have it light in this area, then begin to have a gradient or fade this way. So now when doing rendering, really anything goes. At least that's the way I tend to look at it. I don't tend to render everything the same way. I think that you want to create lots of variation within the scene. You want lots of different line clarity and quality. So some people, I think, will hinder themselves and say, well, I just can't make clean lines yet. And that's fine. I mean, you definitely want to strive to make better and better lines. But if you are working digitally, keep in mind a big part of this is, let me get rid of that circle there. A big part of this is mechanics. So like you notice I'm zooming back here for the first kind of pass that I want to do. Mainly because it makes this circle, soon to be a sphere, about 2 inches on my screen. So it makes it a lot easier for me to generate these lines. Now the other thing is, if I go like this, I may or may not get that shape that I want right there. So again, to kind of aid myself in that process, and you could do this with a pencil if you're working traditionally, just draw a light line to give you that guide. Now if you're working digitally, you can do this on a separate layer. I'm not going to worry too much about it. And not getting right there. Okay, so now when I go to draw these lines, it's going to be a lot easier. You know what, and I will do a separate layer just on top of the sphere. So something like, see, I'm just kind of redoing it until I get what I want there. And so now I'll draw right through that. So now what happens is I don't have to focus so much on my starting and ending point. And you know, keep in mind, I always get people to say, well, I can't do that because I'm working traditionally. Anything you can do digitally, you can do traditionally. Almost anything. I better not put a blanket statement on that. But for instance, one of the things that you do to do this exact same effect is you use Frisket, or you know, I've seen people even mask it off with paper. Some people will even get good at cutting a slice of paper and then maneuvering it around so they can just do those quick sweeping pulls. Because generally what's going to happen is if you go like this real slow, you know, you might get a decent line. Over time, you get better and better at it. I know doing this line side to side will be even bumpier, but if I shoot this line quicker and in succession, and believe me, I've practiced making those types of lines quite a bit to even get them this straight. So just keep that in mind. Speed, the mechanics, and the distance in which you work. So working from your wrist to your shoulder to the movement of your arm, the pivot of your elbow, things like that. All those things factor in, so you have to really play with those. But since we do have a separate layer here, we can easily just go over here, clean this up, and just add to it. And really you don't even have to worry about it yet unless it bugs you. You could kind of do this at the end. You could get rid of this line if that bothers you. So you could erase that back, and you know, you just wanted that initial shape really to have the that fade. And I mean, look how even those simple basic lines immediately add curvature. Not much, but it's starting to work. So then what you want to do here is just say, well, what if I crisscross these a little bit? And I'm not even going to worry about line weight yet, because I want to really focus on what I can do with these basic lines. Now keep in mind, you can make this fade and this shadow darker by simply bringing these lines closer together. In fact, a big kind of amateurish mistake, and we're all guilty of it. I don't like to really say amateurish too much, but we're all guilty of it, is that sometimes we just don't bring the lines tight enough together to have convincing shadows in the right areas. So play around with the distance that these lines are from one another, and you'll get a nicer range to your ability to generate shadows. So let's go ahead and tighten up on this a little bit more. And I probably could have brought those even closer together. But notice now I've got basically 3 levels. I've got the highlight, the midtone, and the shadow. But I want this to be darker. I want it to be a lot darker through here. So what I'm kind of imagining is that I want a nice heavy shadow, not to black, but almost to about right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate the screen, just like rotating your paper. I'm going to tighten up even more. And I'm going to bring these lines in, and I want these to be a little bit tighter in succession and a little bit heavier line weight. Not much, but I'm actually putting a little bit of pressure as I shoot these lines over. Now, you can probably notice I'm almost curving these lines. I'm not trying to be too dramatic about it because the initial ones aren't that curved. I don't want to really change up my process too much yet. But curving the lines is another great way to convey, roundedness and depth to the form. So it works really well with anatomy. Obviously, we're working with a sphere here, so it makes sense to use it here. I didn't want to start with that because I also want to let you know that if you're not good at curving these lines, do not worry about it. Don't beat yourself up over it, and just slowly let yourself get a comfort zone with that. You can do some amazing illustrations with a series of straight lines. In fact, you can get pretty creative with straight lines and actually make the illusion of curvature and things like that. So just the main thing is that you're thinking more about gradation and value and creating depth here than worrying about line clarity and when to put in a curved line, a straight line. Just, think about the gradation. That's all we want to focus on at this point. Okay, so now we've got a darker tone here. We've got another mid-tone here, a lighter mid-tone, and a highlight. So what if I wanted to introduce another bit of shadow right through here? I feel like there's too much of this mid-tone. Like it wouldn't be that light. We'll call that a 50% or something. It just wouldn't be that light. To me, there needs to be another little transition right there. So how would I do that? I could simply try to pick a different angle than what I've got here, or just some very tight, I'll actually go with lines that are straight up and down, and I'll bring them in tighter. But I'm going to make sure to go from here all the way through the rest of the work. Now, why am I doing that? Because it's going to darken everything with this next tone. So it's like just adding a layer in a sense. But again, this doesn't apply to just traditional or just digital. It works the same way. But for the part that I am going to make it a bit easier for digital, I'm going to add this extra layer. And I'm going to draw through this. Just, again, you could do this with a pencil though. So if you're working traditionally, just draw a line right through there. And then if you need the comfort of not stopping at the line, then you just add some Fresket or whatever, mask it off. So what I'm going to do now is draw right through here and just try to add this next level. Actually, I need to be a little bit further back for the comfort of my hand here. So panning back is a double-edged sword too, because what I tend to notice is that it becomes harder for me to do tighter lines in succession, but that's where you just have to go for it. You see these are actually lining up with those bottom lines, so I probably should have picked a slightly different angle, but it's not necessarily a big deal if they coincide. I don't think anyways. It tends to look a little bit messier, but again, I don't want you to be too worried about this idea of intense line clarity and refinement at this point. I just want you to keep shading until you get the depth that you want. So I'm going to erase back that starting point line, almost like we're erasing back a pencil line. And you see right there, we've got even more shading. And I really just keep carrying on through this concept and trying to get something that feels dimensional. Now the other thing, and I like to do, is like pan back really far and look at it almost like it's just a airbrushed fade. Try to perceive it that way. If you pull back far enough, it'll generally look like that. So now what I want to do is add a little bit more. Let's say, let's just go this way. I'm just going to draw right over this. I'm going to use a little bit heavier line weight, mainly because I'm trying to kind of get to the end result a little faster. So just like that. You see it darkened up that that edge just the way I wanted. Erase back some of these lines. And look how rounded that's starting to appear with just lines. And not, none of these lines are very well done. I mean, they might be pretty clean left to right or something, or parallel to one another. But there's definitely some inconsistencies there. So perfection is not something you should hold yourself accountable to this. Let's go ahead and stop here. We're going to head over to the next lesson and continue to make this more dimensional. We're going to actually add a drop shadow now. So with that, let's move on to our next lesson.